Good afternoon. Cairo has hosted a high-stakes five-party meeting, bringing together the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, along with the Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul-Gheit. This pivotal gathering underscores Egypt's commitment to uniting Arab efforts in addressing the escalating Palestinian crisis against the backdrop of heightened tensions in Gaza and growing concerns over displacement. The meeting aims to tackle pressing issues such as humanitarian aid, regional stability, and the future of Palestinian rights. These discussions have the potential to shape a unified Arab stance and reinvigorate support for the Palestinian cause amid mounting challenges. Welcome to In Depth. Welcome back. And Stephen Witkoff, the Trump administration's Middle East envoy, has visited the Gaza Strip on Wednesday to support a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, which has allowed displaced Palestinians to return to their homes. According to the New York Times, Witkoff, the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Gaza in years, also met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of another round of detainee releases. While in Gaza, he visited the Netzarim corridor, where American contractors are assisting in the return of displaced people. His visit also comes ahead of legislation targeting the UN agency aiding Palestinian refugees and discussions on the third round of Israeli-Hamas hostage exchange. Now, with Gaza facing a deepening humanitarian crisis and regional tensions escalating, Cairo's five-party meeting brings renewed focus to the Palestinian cause. To delve deeper into its significance and potential outcomes, we're joined by Mr. Khalid Dawood, Al-Ahram Weekly Managing Editor from Cairo, and we're also joined by Mr. Ihab Omar, a journalist at the Ahram from Cairo, to analyze the challenges and opportunities this pivotal gathering presents for the Arab unity. Good afternoon to you both, gentlemen, and let me start with you, Mr. Dawood. What are the main objectives of this five-party meeting in Cairo?
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Of course, this meeting comes at a very critical time after U.S. President Donald Trump took office nearly 2 weeks ago. And of course, his statements or proposal, let me say, on deporting the residents of Gaza to both Egypt and Jordan has caused wide controversy and rejection from all the Arab countries involved, because they violate all the basic tenets of the settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict as we've known them back more than 30 years ago, dating to the Madrid Peace Conference and the Oslo Accords that were signed by the Palestinians and the Israelis. So it was very important to hold this meeting among the key Arab countries that are all considered to be close U.S. allies, whether Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, or Jordan, and of course the representative of the Palestinian Authority. But at least these five Arab countries, they're considered to be close to the United States, lots of strategic interests. So hopefully the message that came out of this meeting will kind of reflect on the U.S. government's position and perhaps convince Mr. Trump to reconsider this proposal, totally rejected proposal that he's made on the future of Gaza and how we can basically reconstruct that destroyed after 15 months of Israeli war. So
Right.
It was very important for these ministers to gather and send a joint message that they are not going to give up on the non-alienable rights of the Palestinian people to consist that the path forward is a two-state solution, and at the same time confirm their commitment to assist in implementing the three-phased ceasefire agreement that was mediated by President Trump's personal envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, and that more humanitarian aid and assistance should get into the Gaza Strip. But most important, it's a kind of a reflection of a united Arab position by key Arab countries on the future of the Palestinian cause at a very critical and difficult times for the Palestinian people.
Indeed, we'll get back to the messages that needs to be sent here. But before that, let me go to Mr. Ihab Omar. And how does Egypt's hosting of such a meeting reflect its role in the Arab diplomacy?
Greetings to you and your kind guest and your viewers. Today, the Palestinian cause is not an Egyptian concern only, but the whole Arab countries of the League of Arab States. Today was a great evidence of this reality that the United States is trying to forget it, as well as the Israeli media by falsification that there are a disagreement between the Arabs. But today's meeting is responding to these lies, or the American thought that this cause. And it is our case by the attempt of US to implement a new scenario of the displacement and the evacuation of 2.5 Palestinians. The US trying to provide lures before the Arab countries as well as the Palestinian people in the Gaza, proclaiming that that is only a temporary stint. But Egypt's state has the ability to respond, not to use hard, unpopular words, but reasonable response. Back to the history, each Palestinian left their land in 1948 or 1967 as a temporary leave. Only one goal is to go back to the Palestinian territories, and therefore the Egyptian diplomacy has an excellent role by hosting this meeting. And normally I do not use an historical term, but today's statement is an historical statement that clarifies that all the Arab nations against all the types of displacement and do not reflect that 2.5 Gazan residents will stay defending the right in their territories. Most importantly, as Mr. Khaled indicated, that we shouldn't have enough responding on the idea of displacement, but we are advocating the two-state solution, which is the real path that the Palestinian goes or the Middle East should go through, not the attempt of another country to be this settlement. So to announce the Palestinian state according to Oslo's meeting and Madrid's convention, reaching to the Abraham Agreement. So today, by the main Arab states lined up, indicates that all the players such as the US and Israel proclaiming that displacement. It is most importantly to remind the world by the Arab alignment behind in Egypt in 1973 October and all the issues the Arab world have been through. So it is a new attempt of the Egyptian role to confront the attempt of displacement as well as the pressures by the USA proclaimed by President Trump.
Indeed, indeed, a very important point, which is a unified Egyptian position. Mr. Dawood, let me get back to you here. And with the dire situation Gaza is reeling from, now, what could be the measures that could be proposed to provide aid to the people of Gaza at this very particular time?
Well, already Egypt is very much involved in the providing of the humanitarian assistance. The Egyptian government, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has repeatedly stated the place into rubble. I mean, 90% of the buildings and the infrastructure and the electricity grids in almost every way to sustain life in Gaza has been destroyed. So definitely there is a massive need for a construction plan that will meet demands of the Palestinian people for many years to come. We've already seen the trucks getting into Gaza in rather huge numbers that we haven't seen in the past 9 months at least, but definitely there is still need for much more. As soon as the agreement proceeds, the ceasefire agreement, we're going to see some reconstruction equipment getting into Gaza that are been banned over the past 16 months to prevent the Palestinians from rebuilding their houses. So basically the Palestinians right now, they need everything, and that's where the role of the Arab countries becomes important. But Egypt will always remain the key entry point and the key coordination point for all this the assistance that's supposed to come to Palestine. It's very important on that level to coordinate with the other Arab countries who are definitely going to have a very important role to play in funding this reconstruction. But let me say here again something that President Sisi has repeatedly referred to, that, I mean, we want a permanent settlement for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and not a temporary one that would lead basically to a new war once every 4 or 5 years. And then we find ourselves at the same point whereby there's a destroyed Gaza Strip, thousands of people killed, and a massive need for reconstruction money to be able to kind of fix what the Israeli aggression has done. So, I mean, that's a cycle that we in Egypt here want very much to avoid, and to get to the basics of solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through reviving the Middle East peace process, and perhaps convincing the new U.S. president as one of the alternatives that we can on what has already been agreed on, which is a two-state solution, a Palestinian state in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem as its capital, whereby it will live in peace next to Israel. And then we can start think of a brighter future rather than that of continuous wars that we've been seeing in this region over the past 8 decades, let me say that.
And that's another message that this meeting is sending. Mr. Omar, let me ask you now, or the meeting is coming at the backdrop of many of the international pressures. Now, how do those international pressures could influence the discussions at this meeting?
In fact, Egypt is a national pass identified internationally, so, and we cannot let for the President Trump to go into wars that would threaten the Palestinian cause. Therefore, Egypt, under these circumstances, along with the state of Qatar on the reconstruction of Gaza, and Egypt is going to activate the file of reconstruction, and we are in dire need of Arab funding of reconstruction, not to
Mr. Ihab, my question, pardon me if I interrupt you. My question would be, or my question was, how would the international pressures affect discussions in this meeting?
The International pressures are in place. Maybe it is the cause of this meeting before the American attempt. And I think that some European countries never moved till now, but supporting the proposal of America of the Gazan displacement. Today's article, the main one in the meeting, regarding the rejection of displacement, this response isn't negative without any escalating and steps or movement, but there is a committee is going to be emerged of that meeting to go throughout the European countries and US administration by or to reach a consensus with them. The Egyptian diplomacy, when rejecting the Western direction, is just not for a matter of rejection, but proposing solutions and to be free for the main Palestinian cause. So the American pressures were present and the threat of displacement were in place, but the statement of the summit was clear in rejecting displacement and to pursue a counter diplomacy to dismantle this US plan through consultation with the world countries as well as the current US administration to the idea of surrendering and to have working with this proposal is not actually imprisoned before the Egyptian diplomacy.
Getting back to you, Mr. Dawood, and from your point of view, could there be potential of an impact of the US policies on these discussions?
Definitely. I mean, again, I think it was pretty significant in the statement. Maybe the second or third point in the statement was expressing willingness to work with the new US administration so that at least, I mean, again, it's a reminder of the special relationship that those Arab ministers who met in Cairo today have with the United States. So it's not like, we are totally closing the door for cooperation with the new US administration. But again, a reminder that any cooperation or negotiations the US would be involved have to be based on international legitimacy decisions that cannot be ignored. We cannot simply ignore all that issued by the Security Council, by several Arab summits that are basically stating the parameters of any settlements based on the Israeli withdrawal from occupied Arab territories in return for normal relations between Arab countries and Israel. That's a basic tenet that I don't think has changed, and I don't think that there are any signs that it's going to change. And I guess, I mean, again, if one of the priorities of President Trump is to resume his effort to normalize relations between Arab countries and Israel, the proposal to deport the Palestinian people will basically fail any of those efforts. And I think it was very important to hear from the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia and even from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself that Saudi Arabia will not agree to any measures that does not involve the establishment of a Palestinian state. So yes, Saudi Arabia is open to discuss possible normalization of relations with Israel, but this is not going to happen without the recognition of the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. So the American pressure and the American changes were very clearly present in today's meeting, and I guess it was one of the main reasons why this meeting was held with the participation of those particular countries. It was not an overall meeting for all Arab foreign ministers. I guess the result wouldn't have been any different, but the fact that this statement and this position and stand is being adopted by very close allies and friends of the United States, I think it should make a difference for the new administration in Washington and set the parameters of the discussions in the future. So it's very important to have this united Arab stand when it comes to the policies of Mr. Trump and his new proposals.
Mr. Omar, how might Israeli policies complicate efforts towards peace in the region?
Certainly, Egypt is trying to take advantage of the American pressures and American relations with Trump and Netanyahu to make new pressures not only in Gaza but before Egypt. The by provocating and sub-fights of the nature of arming the Egyptian army in that time, or Israel attempted to talk about the presence of the Egyptian army and arms in Sinai, despite the Egyptian-Israeli agreement was amended in 21. So Israel is trying to take a advantage of this pressure to execute the project of displacement by more pressure in Egypt and the Palestinian and Gaza, including the threat of the idea of stopping the exchange swap or stalling the withdrawal from Gaza and to execute it in the second phase. And the attempt to there is an Israeli raid made by the Israeli forces in Gaza Strip. Therefore, Israel is trying to invest the space of the American pressures, but they are not enough. It isn't going to execute what they wish in that time. So the issue now is between Egypt and the US and the main countries in the Middle East that they are playing a very effective role, such as Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Qatar or the United States. And normally the direct communications between the Arabs and USA and Israel supervisor of the outputs of these communications to reach a settlement that proper and acceptable by Tel Aviv.
Right. Mr. Dawood, what are the existing concerns regarding the displacement of Palestinians?
Well, again, as Mr. Ihab has referred to, it's something historic. We've been through the major catastrophe of 1948, in which Israel forcibly removed more than 1 Palestinian refugees. And let me remind you that most of the Gaza residents are originally refugees who came from the parts of Palestine that were occupied by Israel in 1948. So, I mean, again, they learned a lesson very well. I mean, that this is not something to even consider, to give up their territory. President Trump's advisors would have shown him the pictures and the videos of the Palestinians who rushed to go back to their homes in northern Gaza from southern Gaza as soon as the agreement on the opening of the Netzarim corridor went into effect, despite the fact that they knew very well they're going back to rubbles. They're not going back to a kind of comfortable living, but still, they insisted to go back and resettle the parts of Gaza that they were forced to leave as soon as the war started. And right now, I mean, at least according to estimates, at least 500,000 Palestinians have moved back from the south to the north in a matter of a few days. So that's not a kind of a people who's going to accept any proposal related to being moved from Palestine, from their land in Gaza, to either Egypt or Jordan, knowing the complexities in both countries. I mean, again, this is a threat to Egypt's national security, a participation which President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi clearly stated going to take part in any injustice. And the thought and the proposal to move the Palestinian people forcibly is not just a matter of ethnic cleansing or violation of basic agreements, but it's again a major injustice that's going to be inflicted on the Palestinian people at the time everybody is trying to work on finding a permanent settlement for this long-standing conflict. And I guess it was very important to deliver this message as well, if I might remind you, ahead of the meeting that's supposed to take place on Tuesday between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So at least right now, the Arab stand is very clear. We're not going to stand anything close to displacement again. We want to go back to the roots of solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and not the time at all to bring up those kinds of proposals. If President Trump is truly honest about his intention to become a peacemaker and not a war maker, because any proposal that comes close to forcibly deporting Palestinians will basically be a prescription for instability in the region. And I guess this was clearly reflected in the statements that were made by President Sisi as well as the Egyptian Foreign Ministry.
Regional instability, exactly the word. Let me here go to Mr. Omar, and from your point of view, the forcible relocation of Palestinians, how would that affect the regional stability?
طبعا يعني أي دولة حينما يتم تفريغها إجباريا من سكانها فإن
Any
ذلك يؤدي
country,
إلى
if forcibly being evacuated from its residents, if we're talking about the evacuate Gaza from its residents, it will be in a direct Israeli occupation into Gaza. So this will record an unprecedented state to evacuate all that size of a space that bigger than the other rounds gave a space for it, and this would jeopardize the peace process and the stability in the region. Gaza Strip is adjacent to the Mediterranean area, and the operation is theater of Suez Canal operation, and all this matters related to the supply chains and trade relation between the north and the south and the east and the east. And the Palestinian people throughout the past 15 months proved that they are very stick and holding the presence of their lands. This such a project won't have any acceptable by the Palestinian people as well as the Arab people as a whole. So the
Yes.
idea of displacement will face a very popular and gross resistance that would trigger a new circle of violence. Maybe it would be more than the past 15 months or the first or second Intifada uprising. So the Palestinian people would understand that the defeat is going to be an end
Briefly,
to
Mr.
negotiating, not just for
Briefly,
the
Mr. Ihab, because we're running out of time here. I guess your point was very clear. That was Mr. Khalid Dawood, Al Ahram weekly managing editor, and Mr. Ihab Omar, a journalist at Al Ahram. We thank you so much for your insights and valuable analysis, and I guess the message or the messages were clearly sent. That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.